from the Heart.
Hello and welcome back to Horror from the Heart. I'm Josh, and today I wanted to talk about horror in real life. Now, when I say horror in real life, I mean the full spectrum of horror in real life. There's tons of true crime stuff that happens out there with horrific events that occur, like the Columbine shooting and things like that. And there's tons of places out there on either YouTube or on different podcasts and things like that where that's what they talk about. They talk about true crime. And a lot of people don't ever think of that as a horror element, but to me, that's always been one of those ones that really has been a horrific type of thing, because you're listening to real life losses that actually happen. Now, as far as real life horror, it's not just with the true crime stuff that's ever happened here in our lifetime or previously before we were even born. There's also like the haunted stories and things like that. You hear tons of podcasts and tons of YouTube places out there that love to tell like true scary stories of supposedly haunted things that occur. Either it's haunted places or it is actual possessions and things like that. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have like The Exorcist. It was supposedly based off of a real exorcism, and you have other movies out there that do that kind of stuff too. Now, when we talk about horror in real life, it's one of those ones that we tend to kind of like desensitize ourselves to it, I would say, nowadays, because of the factor that we have so much horror stuff that's out there. Now, with everything that's out there as far as movies and things like that, and with just how prolific the internet is, and news media outlets and how they portray a lot of that kind of stuff too, we seem to be fairly desensitized to a lot of that kind of stuff. And a lot of people have very strong opinions on how things are, but real life horror is one of those things that do happen with true crime. And there's tons of people out there who love following like serial killers and things like that, as far as what they've done or where they're at now in that kind of way. So when it comes to serial killers, you have people like Ed Kemper or the Green River Killer or Charlie Manson and things like that. And tons of people love following that stuff. And we've made tons of shows and tons of movies based off of stuff like that. Like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was based off of real life stuff. It's not a real life story, even though it starts out with this is a true story or based on a true story. But it's actually based off of like Ed Gein, who was very, very creepy with how he did his kind of stuff. I mean, hell, even Psycho was based off of some of the real life serial killer type of things that are out there. But you have the stuff that's there as far as the serial killers and the real life murderers and real life crime that happens that makes it into a horror story. I mean, even having your own house invaded into is a real life horror for a lot of people. So it's one of those ones where, to quote another podcast that's out there, I love the way they do it is, stay sexy and don't get murder, because that's essentially what we try to do every single day is we try to make sure that we are maintaining our own safety in a lot of different ways. So, and then that's one of those ones that we find intriguing too for those of us who get into horror stuff, because if you get into horror stuff, most likely you probably get into a lot of the true crime stuff. It's not to say that that always happens or everybody who gets into horror gets into true crime, but there's tons of people out there who love to do that kind of stuff. And there's tons of prolific people out there who do that kind of stuff too. Now, to jump back onto like the haunted stories and stuff like that, there are tons, and I mean tons of places where people say, well, this place is haunted, or I've seen ghosts and things like that. You can go out to New Mexico and there's tons of places out there that have haunted stories, tons of places in the southern states that have those, tons of places in the Northeast that have those. All across the world, there are places that have some sort of horror story as far as a haunting that might be occurring or whatever happens. I mean, hell, there's one within the local area where they call it, it's like the Devil's Crossing type of thing, where supposedly there used to be rituals that were there. It's kind of an interesting kind of thing. And there's tons of areas where they say, hey, don't go to this area simply because of how haunted it might be. And then you have a lot of the urban explorers, and I know that wasn't as prolific whenever I was growing up. People did that kind of stuff just for fun, and we weren't recording ourselves and pushing it up on the internet because, I mean, hell, the internet was an infant at that time. We didn't have a lot of the stuff that we have nowadays. So I'm pretty sure I would have been one of those types of people that did that kind of thing. But you have a lot of urban explorers that go looking at that, either to go look at the decrepitness of whatever place it is, but a lot of those people go out there to go find haunted type of things. You know, it's one of those ones where there's tons of people out there who believe in ghosts, who believe in possessions, who believe in demons, you know, and to each his own on that kind of thing. Some people do, some people don't. Now, me, myself, I believe in ghosts. You know, I could sit there and tell you stories that I've had from previous years that, you know, were kind of creepy in those kind of ways because of the factor of, I swear to God, it was probably a ghost. You know, a lot of places that I worked at in my lifetime, you hear ghost stories. I worked at a college campus for a good long while, and you heard tons of ghost stories that were there because of how old the campus was. Now, I always found like the haunted stuff really interesting, you know, and to me, whether you want to call it, you know, a supernatural type of thing, to me that was always like a real life horror type of thing, because it's that being scared of what may potentially be there or what may not potentially be there. And you have tons of people out there who do or have done. I'm not saying that they still do. I'm sure there's people out there that still do that kind of stuff. But people out there who do like ritualistic killings and things like that in the name of whatever god it is that they believe in or whatever demon it is that they believe in, because of the factor that that's what they believe in. So it's mixing that supernatural with the real life in that kind of way, which makes it a real life type of horror thing. And there's tons of cults out there too. And that's part of that real life horror stuff out there too, because you could name quite a few different cults. Now, I'm not going to name any here simply because you never know who's ever listening, or, you know, who might have a different opinion as far as like, that's not a cult type of thing. I'm not here to piss anybody off. I'm here for entertainment value only, and just kind of talk about horror in general. But there's tons of people out there who are in cults, and some of the creepy stuff that some of those cults actually do is a real life horror. Some of the stuff that people have been put through is real life horror. Even look at a lot of the wars that we've had over all the years. That's real life horror, whether you want to consider it or not. You know, like the stuff that has happened within World War II or World War I. There was a lot of horrific stuff that happened during that. Here in America, there's tons of stuff from the Civil War that has happened that was real life horror stuff. Now, you can also go back into a lot of the older stuff that was out there, and that's one of the reasons why we have some of the things that we do, because it was based off of real life horror. Like, you look at something like Dracula or vampires just in general, you know, and that's based off of real life horror of Vlad Tepes, and as I kind of mentioned before in a previous episode, but it was based off of a real life person with just how barbaric he was and just the stories that came up because of that. And there's a lot of tales that come out with our fantasies and the horror that we enjoy nowadays that is somewhat based off of truth, that is somewhat based off of somebody's realization of this might be what it is type of thing from way back when. Now, encompassing all of that, though, I'm kind of curious as to whether or not you guys get into true crime, or if you guys get into like the ghosts and haunted places type of stories and things like that, whether or not you guys believe in that kind of thing too. You know, like I said, for me, myself, I actually believe in ghosts, and I won't ever touch a Ouija board. That's just rule number one when it comes to things, when you go into that kind of stuff. But I'm curious if you guys follow any of the serial killer type of stuff, or if you guys get into true crime and the horror, you know, element that is there because of that, or the urban legends and things like that too. So if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment down below. Send me a like if you like the video. If you're listening to this on podcast, leave me a review and share if you guys can. And if you've made it all the way to the end of this part, I very much appreciate you taking the time to listen to me. each and every single time that you have. So you can also follow me on Twitter at HorrorFTH, and I hope to see you guys in the next episode.